photojournalist with the Times Union. He has been there 40 years, or just about 40.
A few months from now, we'll be 40 years.
So he has photographed several and everything pretty much that you can think of in Jacksonville. And I want to tell a fun story too, that Nancy and I ran into him in the Wells Fargo building one day, which was great. And I reached out to Bob, and he was kind enough to say that he would be willing to talk to us about his experiences and also meld it into how we can think about our street photography for Kim's big exhibition. So thank you, Bob. We appreciate it. Thank you for putting up with all this chaos. Everybody be really nice to him.
Okay, always. Chaos is the nature of what I do, so you don't get flustered up too much after a while.
You don't have to be a stand-up comedian.
No.
Song and dance?
If you read it all, it's usually pretty dry.
What are we doing? Batteries in the microphone? Yeah. We just heard it. I heard it. I don't feel it. Battery was low when it died. You know what? I wonder if the laptop and microphone would work, you know, Scott.
The timing of the collision.
Good to go? Father's Day week for many, many years. Okay. Welcome. My name is Bob Self. I'm a staff photographer at Florida Times Union. Came to the paper for the job somewhere in 1984, and it's been the only full-time job I've ever had. And when I retire in the not so distant future, it will remain the only full-time job I will ever have. And I'm looking forward to that, but I'm still having fun, and I still love what I do. I kind of came into photojournalism through the back door. I was a science nerd. Went off to college thinking I was going to become a veterinarian. Taking the core biology sequence at University of Florida with 750 other pre-med, pre-dent, pre-vet, pre-sciences majors, and struggling through that, and then bombing the core chemistry sequence. I kind of figured maybe that school wasn't in my future, but I was still sure I was going to be in the sciences. So I took 3 years of heavy science curriculum. And somewhere along the way, I started taking pictures. I got a job with the Public Affairs Office at the University of Florida, and I was their lab tech. And then they started sending me out shoots for science, because I started in the analog era with film and paper and all that good stuff, and films. And then I took a couple of photography classes at Florida. I took the beginning photography class at the photojournalism program and the beginning photography class in the fine art program at the same time. And that kind of defined the way I approach photography for the rest of my life. I've always been intrigued by the photography. I love photojournalism. I love dealing with people. And I love being out on the street. Very unpredictable. You never know what's around the next corner, and in all my years, no 2 days have ever been the same. And, but I also love the fine art photographers. And I mean, Jerry Yulesman was a professor when I was in Florida. He was working with the graduate students. I at least was fortunate enough to be able to go to a couple parties at his house. But you know, I was just in awe of this man who just did the most amazing things in the dark room. You know, printing on 12 enlargers for one image with pieces with negatives from all these things that, you know, in an analog era, being able to create these amazing, fantastical images. So, you know, when I approached photojournalism, I tended to be able to see it from different sides. My brethren that were all J school students, journalism school students, they kind of came out with this particular perspective, and mine was a little wider. And so I've always kind of tried to bring that into the work that I do. And I've always been intrigued by the photographers that kind of straddle the line between photojournalism and fine arts. You know, I kind of like, they're the ones I define as an artist looks at their work and says, oh, that's journalism. And a journalist looks at their work and says, oh, that's our shit. You know, it's like, I always like that stuff the best. And I had a lot of influences. There were some amazing people kind of working in this genre, particularly in the 80s, late 70s and 80s when I started out. One of the earliest that I loved was photographer Robert Belson, French photographer, born in 1912 in Paris, and he was a commercial photographer, and then he started doing other work, and then he just kind of developed his own quirky eye, dealing with street photography, just walking the streets, seeing little moments, little coincidences, little situations where things just kind of fell together, and being able to recognize them and then capture them with his camera. And it took, I had this book for years, and then it suddenly dawned on me what the title of the book meant. 3 seconds from eternity. And what he was saying there is that the totality of all of these images in this book only made up 3 seconds of time. When you're shooting at 1/25th of a second, you know, a 500th of a second, you add up all the time that was captured. It's only 3 seconds from eternity. And I'm like, wow, that's cool. But that goes back to kind of the nature of what photography is. You're capturing these little fleeting moments. They don't tell the whole story. They just tell that fraction of a second of the story. And the photojournalist, my job is to go to events, big commotion, little things going on, I mean, whatever it is, and try and find a definitive image in the chaos that distills the image down in a fraction of a second. And bring all the storytelling elements into that one image. And with that, you have to play, you have to be aware of the dynamics of the crowd, you have to be aware of the light. You know, there's just so many elements, and it's not like you have control over any of them, other than the way you see it and the way you compose it with your camera in the dynamic situation. And that's something that I just love to do. It's something that I've gotten pretty good at over the decades. But show you a little bit of his work. Again, it's all fleeting moments. Some are very subtle, but it's looking beyond just what the central subject is. It's being aware of everything going on in the entire frame. It's a lot of times it's about juxtapositions. It's about quirky coincidences. So, you know, so I've always just kind of been in awe of his work. Another photographer that I absolutely love is Lee Friedlander. Brilliant street photographer. He spent a period of time living in New Orleans, photographing a lot of the early jazz musicians. And he also, and those tend to be pretty straightforward portraits in their houses. But then he did all this stuff on the streets with the jazz bands and the second lines and such. And again, they're very dynamic situations where he's finding these compositions in a rapidly moving situation, aware of every element of the frame, and somehow managing to get them all together and make them work. This photo is one that again for me is a mind blower. It's like a Jackson Pollock painting. There's something going on in every square inch of that frame. And you can just spend forever just kind of exploring the totality of the image. Another one that basically set the standard and kind of redefined street photography, particularly in the United States, was Swiss photographer Robert Frank, who came to the States in the late 50s, in his 20s, and he had a grant. I don't know where it was from, but he basically traveled around the country, hitchhiking, renting cars, whatever, walking the streets, photographing how he saw America, which had pretty much been kind of an Ozzie and Harriet portrayal up to that point. Everything was just perfect, And he could kind of see behind that veneer. And he photographed people that were on the margins. He photographed people in big cities. He just kind of went all over the place. And again, he used the frame. He captured so much information and set a mood, whether it's loneliness, kind of isolation, looking beyond the main subject to see what's going on in the rest of the frame, the rest of the environment. So these were the kind of people that influenced a lot of my work. And I think the best of my work, draws from some of this sort of work. So they were never getting my stuff. And again, a lot of my job with papers is just, again, finding an interesting image from sometimes very mundane situations. And some are just pretty pictures on one level, but they usually always have to have a human element. So then it just becomes a matter of certain times of year, the light was real pretty. In the wintertime, leaves are off the trees, you had nice hard shadows from the early morning light. And then you kind of have that image in your head, and then you just have to wait. Wait for somebody to come along, somebody to be doing something there, walking through the frame, and pull everything together. You look at things from all angles. I spent a lot of time on my hands and knees, laying down on the ground, climbing on top of things, looking down. Nobody wants to look at a bunch of pictures from the perspective of somebody that's 6 foot tall. You got to mix it up. You play with the composition, you play with the lighting, you watch dynamic situations, and kind of wait and see if things fall into place. A lot of times they don't. But again, I tend to think in terms of the whole frame composition. There are times when I shoot with a telephoto lens with a very shallow depth of field because I want to isolate the subject. Boom, it's just about me. It's just about her. And those have their purpose and their place. But other times, I want to tell a story. I want an image that will keep the viewer involved, give them something to look at, and keep coming back and keep exploring. And maybe surprise them. And it just becomes all about looking, about seeing things, trying to see things differently, see beyond maybe the most obvious aspects of an event or a person or an activity. Sometimes you can anticipate. I saw this was in 5 Points. I saw the wall paste stuff on the wall. frame, the composition was all in my head. I just had to wait. Just had to wait for somebody to just walk through the frame and it just, all the pieces kind of fall into place. You look at things different. The museum was having a dinosaur exhibit. And I like to show process. I like to be there when things are getting set up or things are getting torn down. I don't want to be there when it's all put together and pretty and perfect. So I was out there when they were like moving dinosaurs into the museum. Pretty morning light. And just found kind of a fun juxtaposition of shapes and things. And for me, this was just a fun one. Just a reflection in the mirror window of a car. And it works for news photos too. I spent a year working on a story on New Orleans after Katrina. The paper sent writer Mark Woods and I for 4 different week-long trips at quarterly intervals to look at the city and how it changed over the course of the year after the storm. And you just kind of look for different things, different ways of seeing it. If I'm sent out to take pictures of murals, I don't want a picture of just the mural. I want it in context. I want it with people involved in the frame. It gives it a sense of scale. It gives it a little more energy. The artwork's great, but I want it in I want context. And sometimes they're just pretty pictures. They're just fun. But there's days when in the print paper, we just need a pretty picture to stick on the metro front, to fill some space. And then you can still say, hey, the circus is in town, or the circus is getting set up. It doesn't have to be totally literally. We don't have to, you can give people images that make them stop and try to figure out what's going on. And back to looking at things from different angles. You use light. You use shadow. This was great. The guy was working on the mural, and I had a perfectly satisfactory photo of him, up on the ladder painting. But when he stepped away, he pulled the ladder back and he cast the shadow. And it's just like, oh yeah, something completely different than I was expecting. You just have to be open to it and then be able to respond to it. And you don't get a second chance. TV is great at coming out to events and saying, oh, would you do that again for us? We missed it the first time. I don't get a second chance. You either get it or you miss it. Story about Hastings, Florida, and they were going to unincorporate. And so I spent a couple of days out there just kind of learning a little bit about the history and such. This was a gentleman who was basically the black cemetery was outside of the city limits. And he had several family members buried there. And he was out maintaining the cemetery. But just try to make a nice image that there's quite a bit going on. It's not just him pushing a lawnmower. You can explore this one a little bit. Again, if anybody has questions, do not hesitate to ask. You're not going to interrupt me. I like to answer questions on the fly. This was the last eclipse, not the one that just happened, the one that was like in 2017. There's all different ways I could have shot this photo, and they would have given me very different results. I could have backed off with a telephoto lens and just zeroed in on her and the one headstone and made it real tight, real clean. But I want to tell the story that basically says it's not about this one. It's about she's kind of symbolic and representative of everybody, of all the people that are out there that are represented out there. The losses out there. So that's what we need to see, the whole environment. So it was right before the gubernatorial race, and I was trying to figure out a way to illustrate things since there wasn't much happening in Jacksonville. This was a little diner up on North Main Street that had just had a painting done, a mural done of Andrew Gilmore, who was one of the candidates for governor. Things didn't go particularly well for him, but you know, nice morning light. The woman inside was cleaning tables, so you could see her through the window, but then you could see reflections of the building in the early morning sunlight from across the street. So it took what could have been a very static image and took it to a little different level. Yeah.
I noticed you split the frame a lot. Like use something to actually divide the frame, like here.
Yeah, I'm not afraid of that. I like foreground, background. I like to complicate the images a bit. I mean, in one level I'm simplifying and condensing, but in others, I want to force you to spend a little bit more time looking at it. And so I think sometimes that can work well for that. Because I mean, the main subject is the mural, but then it's like, oh wait, there's other stuff going on over here. Always look behind you when you're shooting the video. This was a ship homecoming. It's not just about the ship. Turn around and see what else is going on there. Usually the families are the best photos. Didn't look like something out of Star Wars crawling into the airport. But again, it just so happened that I saw these folks start walking out there. So I went to the end of the pier and positioned myself. And this was with a long telephone wind. It gives you a little compression. But again, you know, if they weren't in that picture, it would have been a boring photo. I mean, it's still a big ship, but they made the picture for me. Light. This was a funeral service for one of the first National Guardsmen killed in the Gulf War, up in Arlington Cemetery. Early morning light. And then there's just kind of chaos, and sometimes you just get really, really lucky. There was a neo-Nazi speaker at the University of Florida. A lot of folks came out to protest and being there. They weren't allowed to be inside of the event, but there were hundreds of folks protesting outside. So I was out there with other national media and local media and just kind of making images and seeing what was going on. This guy, it's kind of cliche, he's from Idaho. In his swastika t-shirt, and he just starts walking through the crowd. He was certainly provocative in what he was wearing, but he wasn't out saying anything negative to anybody. He wasn't raising a stink. He was just kind of walking through and checking things out. Myself and other journalists, we keyed in on him when we were watching him and trying to get him in the context of the crowd that was all cheering him and yelling at him. And then with the guy in the black hoodie kind of running interference, this guy in the green hoodie came up behind him and just sucker punched him. And you know, it happened so fast. But yeah, I was right. And he was an arm's length away from me. I got the frame, my gut reaction just kind of took over. Got that picture, and then another gentleman in the crowd said, we got to get you out of here. African-American guy. Got him, brought him through the crowd. The mob kept following him. This was a row of highway patrolmen that were up a side road that were forming a wall. And I'm working to kind of stay in front of him because I wanted to see him in the context of everybody behind him. And somehow, without even thinking about it, I just went right through the police line. I didn't even think about it. And then they got him, and I was there before he got there. And then they brought him through, and I realized all these other photographers were looking at me like, how did you get over there? And I'm like, I don't know. You know, but I don't look at the horse in the mouth. I made the best of it. We got him coming through the crowd. And, yeah, you know, it's just, you can't anticipate everything. You simply roll with it and react to it.
Are you using multiple frame rates, in other words, shooting continuous when you do these
It
things?
just depends sometimes. So I'm sure when I saw the punch coming, I just pushed the button down and let it run. You know. But you know, something like this, I'd probably shoot little bursts here and there. I can't even remember if I was even looking through the camera when I shot this. I shoot a lot of my best pictures like this. You know, I've at least done enough that I kind of know with wide angle lens and so, you know, I'll get something I can use out of it. Again, dynamic situations, you're in tight, you know, things are changing rapidly, you've got to be aware of what's going on all the way around you. The other people in the frame, you don't want to get shut out by the other members of the media that are there, but you also, you know, you want to play nice with everybody. So, you know, so I do okay in the scrubs. I've got a height advantage on most folks and an arm length advantage. So even if we can't beat the front, I can usually push through. And I don't know if this counts as street photography or not, but it was so much fun. I've flown in just about everything under the sun, both fixed wing aircraft and helicopters. I've never gotten to fly in a fighter jet, but we have been up doing air-to-air photos of the Oracle team, and I've photographed them over the years, and I've flown with some of them over the years. And when we got done, this was media day leading up to the air show at Mayport that year. The Blue Angels were part of the show, and when we got done doing the air-to-air with Oracle, the head of it came over and says, you know, sometimes my buddies in the Blue Angels will come up and fly with us. Would that be something you'd be interested in? I go, yeah, go ask them. So we went up at a small park job, an aircraft that had these behind the pilot seats. You go back a little bit further, and a big chunk of the side of the fuselage is cut away. So it's just wide open. And you're in a monkey harness with a little strap clamped to your back and clamped to the floor of the aircraft, and you just scooch out right to the edge, and it's the best shooting platform in the world. And then we waited, and he came out with the biplane, and he was hanging with us, and we had headsets on, and we could hear him, and finally we could see the two jets coming up, and they came in, and just like, we tucked in wing to wing to wing, and it was surreal. Because when you see the Blue Angels, the way I'd always seen the Blue Angels, you're on the ground. They're fast, they're loud, it's intense. Up in the sky, silent. All the noises behind you. You're moving at the same speed, and you hit a bump in the air, and all of you hit the bump at the same time. So you just kind of do like this. And they took turns changing positions, and he'd go upside down, he'd go right side up, and we moved around. We made a couple passes up and down the beach, and then finally he's like, "How y'all doing? You got what you need?" Yeah, we're in really good shape. So they peeled off and went back. We landed. I don't get excited by a lot these days. I've done a lot, but I was running like a Cheshire cat when I got out of that airplane. That was such a rush. An Elvis impersonator in an assisted living facility. This was casting day at UNF's sculpture department, where they got a big blast furnace going, and they melt down pot metal and pour it into molds. Again, it's just kind of fun with a lot of things going on, a lot of with sparks flying and people moving around, a lot happening. Trying to work with the whole frame, give a sense of the energy. From a story I did on a sign painter, probably the most prolific painter in Jacksonville, but nobody knows his name. Particularly on the north side of Jacksonville in the African American community. He does all the signage on the buildings and the storefronts, and he's just the neatest guy. And so I spent a couple weeks just kind of hanging with him as he was painting jobs and doing signs and installing his work. Little moments, little quiet moments. This was the old courthouse where they used to perform weddings. They had a little wedding chapel gazebo set up, and I spent Valentine's Day there one day just photographing the folks that came through. Faces, just all the storytelling elements. I spent about 17 months photographing the La Villa neighborhood of Jacksonville as it was being urban renewal out of existence once the city got the Jaguars football team, because they didn't want the first thing people saw when they got off the interstate to be that neighborhood. So I just started hanging out, and it was, at the time, it was just a few blocks away from the office. So on slow days, I just go out there and walk the neighborhood. When I first came to town, it was a pretty scary neighborhood for me. We were a young 27-year-old, very intense place. But you can't photograph in a place like that unless people trust you. And the only way to get trusted is to be there and them to see you, and them to see you again and again, and then get curious and start asking you questions, and then you answer their questions. And it gets to the point where finally it's like, oh, he's okay. And you know you've made it when somebody's starting to give you a hard time, and the guy sitting next to him goes, oh no, he's cool. He's been around here. He's fine. Leave him alone. And that's what I did over a long period of time. But again, when we start talking about street photography, I'm going to circle back to that. I don't do it. I guess what I do is street photography, but I don't do it surreptitiously. I mean, if I go into an African American neighborhood, I'm 6 foot tall and I'm carrying cameras. I can't hide. That would be stupid. And you're asking for trouble. So you have to gain the trust of the people in the communities that you want to photograph. And that's true if I go to a country club, because that's a different circle of people too. So you have to make people comfortable with you around. Yes, sir.
Well, question along those lines: has any subject that you took a photograph of asked you to destroy it? Was displeased that you took their photograph and asked you to destroy it? And if so, did you do that?
Some quite hostily. And I learned a long time ago, there's nothing to win by holding your ground in a situation, particularly if you're going to be a repeat visitor. And in this project, I had a guy come up to me. I hadn't even photographed him, but he was not happy. He was convinced I was taking his picture. He came and he was yelling at me. And he wanted to film out of my camera. And I hadn't shot much on that roll anyways. We wound it in the canister, popped it on camera, handed it to him. He took it through our ground, stomped on it. He was happy. He walked away. Picked it up, put it back in my pocket, took it back to the office, processed it. And I still have that film canister. It's kind of a sentiment. But the flip side is working in that neighborhood. It's a drug era. And there was this was during the crack era, and there was a crack dealer, and he'd see me, and from a block away, he'd start screaming at me and cussing at me, and yelling at me and getting out of his neighborhood. And I'm like, it's fine. I'm not here to cause you problems. I'm not here to get you into any trouble. I said, I'm not. You don't worry about it. And that happened several times, and my response was always the same. And then I went back into the neighborhood one day, and I came around the corner, and he was sitting on the curb halfway down the block. He said, come here. Sure. So I walk over to him, he pats the curb, and says, no. I sat down and said, and we just started talking. And he starts telling me about what he does, and he says, I don't use this stuff. He says, people use this crazy. He pulls a rock or crack out and puts it in my hand, and you know, like a little chip of soap. I've never seen it before. Right? And you know, and he takes it back and grinds it into the sidewalk. He says, there'll be people come out here trying to scrape that back up. They're so desperate. And we chatted for a while, and we both got up, we went our separate ways. Never had another problem with it. So what I found was kind of the soft touch approach usually ends up opening doors later on that you never even knew existed. So that's the way I've conducted my business ever since. Yes, sir.
Have you ever asked permission to take a photo with someone?
Sometimes. It really depends on the situation, because unless I'm doing an environmental portrait, I'm not posing things. So I want to capture an authentic moment. And so oftentimes, you know, and again, once you've been here for a while, people get used to seeing you. You know, I may shoot somebody, then I'll go talk to them, because photos aren't any good to me without somebody's name to go with them. In most cases. So I'll usually need to have that conversation with them at some point, but I usually will try, particularly if it's a situation that's changing rapidly, I'll try to get that picture, and then I'll go talk to them. And now in the digital era, you know, I'm going to show them the frame on the back of the camera to make them comfortable, to make them realize, oh, okay, that's cool. I'm good with that. Yes, sir.
I noticed or understood that releases seem to be more of an issue, even in the photojournalistic situations. Do you find, does the paper call on you to use them on certain situations?
I'm not an attorney, but I have read my share of media law, and things have changed over the years. The general guidelines are you can photograph anything you want, anybody you want, in a public area where they have no assumption of privacy. It's fair game. Now, what you do with those photos is a whole different issue. If you use them, as I do, in a photojournalistic context to tell stories about what was going on, it's fair. It's okay. You use it to sell sell product and use their image, you're going to get sued. If you use it in a derogatory fashion, implying something particularly negative about that person or about what was going on that is not true, that's out of context, you can get sued. It can get very costly. But I am in delicate situations. If I'm in somebody's home, I'm in somebody's home because they gave me permission to be there. So yeah, that's. But now, you know, if you're going to do something else with the photos beyond that, which is not what I do. I mean, I work as a journalist and as an artist, I guess, on some levels. But you know, I don't mess with them. I don't change context. I don't add things or take things out of the frames. I mean, what I shoot is what was there in front of the camera on that particular day when I was there. These were all from the Louisville project. Just trying to show what was left and what was going back. This was one of the Tim Tebow Night in the Shining proms for the special needs kids. This goes back to you looking at things from different angles again. I gotta step it up. I'm looking at the clock, it's like, I think 7 o'clock is what, the witching hour. So, again, I tend to like to have a sense of humor with my work when I can find it. At other times, I'm just kind of playing. I'm looking for all these elements. This was one that we're doing a story on his hardware store, like a surplus store. And everything was cool, and I saw the flag on the wall, and the little flag on the shelf, and the one in the window. And I was just waiting for somebody to walk in the front door, just to give a human element. And then the guy that walks in the front door has a big American flag on his shirt. And the photographs are smiling. You can't plan it, you can't make it happen. And there's cool stuff out there. There's interesting things happening everywhere. But you gotta take the photos beyond just showing what something looks like. And sometimes it's as simple as one person's expression in frame.
For a shot like this, was this a problem with photograph?
No, I go up, when we sat and chatted with, there were several folks there, and chatted there, stood on the barrel with them, talked for a little while. Told them what I was doing, and basically made them comfortable with me being there. Told them what I was doing it for. It's hard to pass up something like that. Yeah. You just have to be seen. A lot of even my photographer coworkers, they'll, how do you find this stuff? I said, well, if your radar is tuned in to quirky and offbeat and weird, you tend to find more of it. And that's kind of where I'm at. This was Jacksonville, the original Jacksonville, Curtis Dvorak. This is the first game with the new big scoreboards. And I had wanted to do something with him for years. No, we can't do this, we can't do that. So finally I started, early before the season started, talking to all the people with the Jaguars and talking with Curtis and said, I want to get you doing your bungee jump off the light tower. So we finally got the okay to do it from the team and everybody else. So went up there and had bandolier with a couple cameras and a backpack full of super clamps and all this stuff. We go out on the stadium, one of the tower roofs, and then I go up this little tiny metal ladder and up into the light stand. And by the time I got up there, I was shaking like a leaf, dripping sweat, blood down from my face. He has a whole winning team that was up there. And I got up there and they're like, here, you look like you need to sit down. Here, sit over here. Let's get you some water, And sat for about 10 minutes. It's all good. It's all good. He did his jump. They do a jump in the morning, a test jump, to make sure everything's working well before the game. If he's going to splat, they don't want it to happen when there's a full stadium. So I set up and had everything ready to go, and he did the jump, and I realized everything was in the wrong positions. It wasn't a good shot, So it's like, okay, cool. And they're like, okay, we're gonna all go down and get something to eat. You wanna come with us? And it's like, no, I'll just stay up here. So I reset everything and came back up. Game got started. The flyover, plate jets went by. He did the jump, got off about 3 frames. Boom, that was the end result. Covered a lot of protests during the pandemic. This one, just the spraying really worked for me because the light was just gorgeous. It was down between buildings, it dark in the shadow, it was just this ray of light just blasting out. This was a fun one for me only because I photographed this gentleman for a story about him. We worked at a little restaurant, a little bar called the Goose Flower in Mayport, back during segregation. And he was still around. His son pretty well runs the place now, but he was still around. And I did a really nice environmental portrait of him. And a couple of years later, he passed away. And they had a bunch of mural artists come to town, and one of them took my photo and used part of that image as the image of him that he combined with the rest of his mural. So that was kind of nice. Again, you talk about street photography. You know, another mural shot, but again, if it was just a picture of the mural, it'd be okay. The light was pretty early in the morning, but you know, I wanted something more. So I waited. I waited for people to walk by. I waited for something. Somebody came by and said, well, anything. And then this jogger came by in the shadows. It's not about the jogger, it's about the mural, but it was a framing element. It was something to change the composition and put a little energy in the frame. Hurricane Greg. Filling sandbags. This was a half a mile from my house. First place I had to stop to try and find something to illustrate that, hey, people are getting ready for the hurricane. And I walked up, and this guy had his baby in the car seat while he was filling sandbags. Shot that frame. Had my picture within 15 minutes of leaving my house. Drove around for another 5 hours, never found anything worth taking a picture of. This was the morning after Matthew, after he had ridden out the storm on his boat for the first time ever. And this was him wading back in on the dock. And the wind was still blowing, and I'm getting him coming in, and there was a big oak tree, stuff was flapping, and the wind picked up really big. He just kind of stopped and he looked up. It's just kind of a subtle moment, but it's kind of like Moses taking the 10 Commandments from God. It's like, okay, now what? It was nice of her to have matching pants. This is a recent shoot of a high school prom that was held at the zoo.
Oh, neat place.
It's just so, I don't know, the juxtaposition, it just, for me, it was just a really sweet image. It's for a story on the governor's cracking down on drag shows, and again, fun situation, jam-packed place, everybody on top of each other. But it was a blast. High energy, trying to make something from a totally chaotic situation. Same thing with the mayor. This was inauguration night, this was election night when they finally called the election for it. I was sort of trying to get through the crowd to the podium at the top of the crowd. Again, that's where being 6 foot plus is an advantage. And this was DeSantis when he was in town after the shootings at the Dollar General, and the crowd booing. And that was as he was leaving the event with his security people. This was when I shot Friday night. This was Tom Will's last broadcast. And we had made arrangements to go and spend the evening at the station following his last night. And that's where I met him when I first walked in. He's in the bathroom, he's putting on his makeup. I don't know if he wants you in there. I said, don't ask him. Don't ask him. Because that's what I want to see. And he said, oh, sure, come on in. I just like him, only because it just, people see these people and it's like, there's nothing glamorous about what he does. I mean, you see him with the makeup on in front of all the lights, you know, on a good fake studio backdrop. You know. I want to show real life. I want to show the real thing. This was shot between shooting that and shooting the lighting of the Main Street Bridge with the pride colors. And it was just pretty sunset, the fountain was going, this kid was just like dancing to music and just having the best time and just trying to find kind of a fun frame from that we're going to use for something else completely unrelated. I've covered the big head since it first arrived in Jacksonville. They moved it into the museum. And then I covered it, but they moved it out of the museum to James Weldon Johnson Park in front of City Hall. And then I covered it, but they moved it from there to Wayne Wood's yard in Avondale. And they were trying to figure out how to get it off the flatbed. They had built a ramp to get it down the yard to where it's going to go. And Wayne got up on the front steps and his wife was up there. She said, take my picture. And so he starts mugging for her. I said, yeah, no. And again, I shot this picture and I went and had a conversation. You know, the same thing happens with sports. I mean, it's, you know, you just be aware. You're looking for faces, you're looking for people. I don't need another picture of a guy hitting a little white ball. Those are boring. I want to see the other stuff. I know I'm pushing a little bit. I always over-prepare for these things. It's my favorite photo from the players this year. Again, I don't want to picture the guy with the trophy. I want a picture of the chaos. I want a picture of the energy. I want a picture that tells the whole story. And again, I saw that they had yarn bombed it and they had like a little skirt around it and something was hanging off the arm. And, you know, I just kind of said, let me just park and sit and wait and see what happens. About 45 minutes later, one of the Parks and Rec pickup truck shows up with a guy and he gets out with his whole song. He's like, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
So, Bob, on that note, how long do you said it a lot, that you sit and wait for something?
It just depends. Sometimes it never pans out. Sometimes I'll drive by a situation, you know, multiple days in a row just to see if anything's going on yet, or look at it at different times of day when the light's different. I mean, I have the luxury of doing that because I'm out driving around all the time for assignments. So, you know, if something's happening near the stadium, I'll drive by multiple times to just kind of get a feel for when things are going on. Sometimes the best pictures happen when you're on your way to something else. I was going to MLK breakfast early one morning and coming across the Acosta Bridge, and I could see the river was like glass, and I could see this guy on his shell looking out the river. But he was coming that direction. So I pulled over to the right of way on the bridge, got out and just waited. A big Hindu parade down on the beaches one day. The event was cool, but it's just, I like this guy that was kind of back behind it all, praying, and while big activities up there, the little moment to me was more interesting. You know, same thing comes true, you know, holds over to my vacation pictures. I mean, when I'm on vacation, I'm not there as a photographer. I figured out that if I'm trying to have fun and do photography at the same time, I end up not doing either of them for people at all. So I prioritize the experience of the trip, but I don't function in any social setting without something to take pictures with, close at hand, whether it's my cell phone or carrying a camera. But that was like first week of this year, my wife and I went to Yellowstone for a week in the wintertime. And we went up, and the place is deserted. It was wonderful. Nobody around. And to be up and watch Old Faithful when there were 12 people up and out that morning. This is, last year, my wife and I did 2 weeks in Tanzania. Basically, nature safari, and I'm not a wildlife photographer. It just doesn't, I like people. So, of course, I shot animal pictures because my wife wanted to see animal pictures. So I did that, but at the same time, I was looking for the human moments and the elements and the composition and the light. And this was just one of a few frames from that trip that I got really excited about. And again, this is the Hermitage in St. Petersburg, Russia. And we were there on 3 days in St. Petersburg on a cruise. And love art, love the museums, but I also crowd dynamics. At this point in time, the Chinese tourists had replaced the Americans as kind of the ugly American tourist. That was the Chinese. That kind of would come in swarms, and they would like run from one masterpiece to another, just long enough to take a picture or a selfie with it, then run to the next one like they had to check all the boxes. And this somewhat salacious painting was big thing hanging on the wall and going through a crowd. So that's what I wanted to show. So anyway, that's where I end it. Please ask questions. I know everybody's not ready to go home.
Well, do you post-process your images?
Minimally. I'm the polar opposite. I grew up and started my career in the analog days. So we would go into the darkroom and we would make prints. And you could dodge and burn and alter contrast. And then when we started making color prints, you could do color corrections. And that's pretty much all I would do. And ethically, as a photojournalist, that's pretty much all you're allowed to do. You need to get the light. You can't go crazy with the saturation. You can't add or subtract anything. You play the card you're dealt. Some days it's gorgeous. Some days it's just ugly flat light. You just live with it.
How about, do you ever run into situations where your editor says, I'd like to have this crop a certain way, I'd like this part of it, but I don't really like
There used to be times when we had those discussions, but we don't have editors anymore. Everybody's been eliminated. We now have a staff of 2 photographers covering a city with 1 million+ residents. There's minimal, we just don't cover much. Not like we used to. But, and if I have questions, I'll go to my coworker and say, Corey, what do you think? Should I do it like this or do it like that? And he does the same with me. I've done it a while now. I've got a pretty good eye for things. I know the way I want them to look. Once it leaves my hands, once it goes into the computer, once it goes to the off-site Mac sweatshop layout place where they crank these things out and couldn't find Jacksonville on a map, I quit worrying about it because I have no control over that. So I worry about what I have control over. That's doing my job right, doing it ethically, creating the best images that I can, putting my whole heart and soul into that part, and then when I upload, I'm on to the next thing. It's not very hard.
You had an exhibition, and I was led to believe you're working on a book of photographs from American Beach.
Yes, sir, I am. That's my kickoff retirement project. I spent 3 summers at American Beach, summers of 88, 89, and 90, with 2 Leica rangefinders and a whole lot of Tri-X film, and just documented the day-to-day activity there. I had heard about it. I'd only been in the paper a few years. I kept hearing about American Beach. And I learned a little bit of the history, but I didn't find a whole lot about it. And when I would inquire about it, I tended to get this dismissive response of, isn't that the Black Beach? And I'm like, yeah. You know, I didn't know such a thing still existed 20 years plus after the end of legal segregation. So one summer, in July of 89 or 88, I drove up there. Cameras, I bought a full film and just laid it in the ground. And there would just be hundreds of people out there on the weekends. And it was a place to see and be seen. It was partying and showing off the new hairstyle and listening to the music and barbecuing and socializing. Nobody went in the water. And it was the beach was secondary to everything. It was just the destination. And I had no agenda. I didn't know enough about it to have an opinion. I was just fascinated by what I was seeing and just started documenting. Again, no storyline, no point of view, just curious. And that was another situation where it's like, pretty much the only white face out there. And for a long time, I spent a lot more time answering other people's questions than I did taking pictures. They were convinced I was either a cop or I was a developer coming to buy the place up. And so you answer people's questions honestly. You're completely open. You don't do anything surreptitiously. And over time, if you do it right, you gain the trust, and people get to know you, you get to know them, and then doors start opening up. And that's what happened for me. I created an exhibit with the show, with the work. Had a grant from Florida Humanities Council to take a leave of absence during the summer of '89 for my job and work on it full time. The next year, went back for fill a few gaps in my coverage, and then created the show. It showed in Jacksonville, opened, and it showed at the Museum of Florida History in Tallahassee, and then it became part of their traveling exhibits program. It showed around a half dozen venues in the state of Florida over the next few years. And then it came home and sat in my garage with shipping crates for 25 years. This was the analog era, pre-computers. I intentionally never put it online. The work's never been seen outside of Florida. I learned by watching another friend of mine's book project. When the work's new, it's cool, everybody wants to see it. When the work gets a little bit old, it's just old work. Nobody's interested in it. It has to simmer for about 2-3 decades before it hits a nostalgia sweet spot, where you've got a multi-generational audience, and that's kind of where it is now. You've got the generation that can remember what it was like in the 80s, and then you've got the next generation that's only heard stories about it, and they've never seen what it looked like then. And what I had no way of knowing when I was doing the work was within that decade, all the crowd stopped. So it was kind of the last straw that I had the privilege to document. Not having any idea that it wouldn't be around forever. And I have a couple of creatives in the African American community. Malcolm Jackson, which is an amazing photographer, and Roosevelt Watson, who's an amazing multimedia artist. And they've done work that kind of plays off of the mythology and the legend and the stories they've heard about the beach. And for me, it's fun to be able to share this kind of work with them, because they see it with completely different eyes than I see. And that to me has always been just an amazing highlight. And the same was true when I was doing the La Villa work. I had somebody that was doing an exhibit at the library in Jacksonville on neighborhoods. And she asked me if I wanted to be part of the show. I was like, yeah, I'd love to, but I really haven't focused on any one neighborhood recently. I kind of shoot in all the neighborhoods in Jacksonville, but I haven't done any extensive stuff except for this stuff I did 25 years ago, in La Villa. So, well, brilliant, let's look at it. I brought it, we had a meeting with all the potential artists. She starts looking through the photos, and she starts crying. And she said, I had no idea. I never knew this place. I never ever saw it like this. And Malcolm, his family was from that neighborhood. And they had businesses there before they had moved into the Springfield area. But he was too young to have ever been in there when I was in there, and at that point, he would have no business being in there. So all of a sudden, it's like a little light bulb in my head goes off. It's like, these people helped me see the work in a whole new context, in a whole new way. So, and that's the part about street photography that I really find interesting, is not only are you capturing this particular moment in time, but also capturing a moment that you can't go back and recreate. And with the passage of time, it takes on a whole new value as an artifact, as a historic document. Because the hairstyles are different, the clothing is different, the cars parked on the curb are different. Those may not have been your subjects, but they're there, and they're unique. And they're unique to that point in time. So not only does it have the immediate importance that you were thinking of when you took it, but it has a value that far exceeds that as a historic document. And that's one of those things I've been pretty conscious of most of my career. So, anyway, that's kind of where I'm coming from, and I hope that was of some interest and some relevance to it.
Absolutely.
Anybody has any other questions? Feel free, I'll talk as long
Will
as
you
you
let
want.
us know when the book comes out?
Yeah, well, I'm currently going through the proposal process with the University of Georgia Press. They're very excited about it. Dr. Janetta Cole, she's an amazing woman. Used to be president of Spelman College in Atlanta, and she was the head of the Smithsonian Museum of African Art, and an anthropologist by training. And then she went on to become president of another women's historically black college. Her great-grandfather was A.L. Lewis, who started the Afro-American Life Insurance Company. The Afro's Pension Bureau bought the property on Bailey Island that became American Beach.
Wow.
And she grew up as a little girl going to that beach with her grandfather. And she's going to write the introduction for the book,
Cool.
which is a huge honor.
Yeah.
Which is a huge honor. And I told her, she said, that work doesn't need me associated with it. I said, no, you don't get it. I said, I don't care about what you accomplished, because it's, what you've done and who you are and what you've done is amazing to me. Just amazing. And nobody, you need no introduction there. I said, I want your memories of going to the beaches. That's all I want. So I'm excited. The press seems to be very excited about it. That's part of why I got to retire, because I got to hunker down and work on this thing. And I've got a couple more projects that I have another publisher interested in, with personal work from the 80s, one on tattooing culture, and another is the vintage photography collection that I represent. I'm a commercial photographer in Jacksonville. It started as a Navy photographer in Mayport in the 40s during World War II, and stuck around Jacksonville as a commercial photographer and worked up until the late 60s, early 70s. And we were friends late in his life, and when he passed, I helped salvage all of his work out of his little one-bedroom, subsidized apartment in Springfield, which ended up being about 15,000 pieces.
Wow.
And I have worked with his family, and I have his family's representative for the collection. And there's a website. I haven't updated it in a few years, but it's vintagejacksonville.net, and it's got a pretty good sampling of his work, which is really fun to look at. Very eclectic, because it was, again, everything from construction site photos and sky and city views from the 50s to strippers' portfolio photos of professional wrestling and Coliseum in the 60s. So, and so I've got a publisher that's interested in both the tattoo project and doing something with his work.
I didn't hear the name of that gentleman.
Lloyd Sandman. He was a contemporary of Virgil Dean out here at the beaches. Lloyd kind of had downtown, and Virgil had the beaches. And Virgil's work is all in the Historical Society of the Beaches, which is also an amazing collection.
Well, thank you so much, Bob, and special thanks.
Again, everything about my job is chaos. It's all about problem solving, because nothing ever